Hello. So, this video is just going to be a semi-chill talk with some game footage and some very light editing, so if you feel like tapping out and watching this podcast style, go for it. You won't miss anything crucial. Also, if you watch me for comedy, this video is probably not going to be up your alley. But for reasons I'll get into later, we're going back to normal videos next week regardless of how this video goes, so don't worry. Not going to get perpetually stuck in the chain of arguing that debates tend to be... Okay, now let's start. Alright, so, geez, first real controversial video. Let's talk about that. Now, I'm of the belief that the like and dislike bar tells you a lot about the quality of your video. Ultimately, I think a very small portion of your likes are people who always blindly agree with you, and an equally small portion are people who always blindly disagree with you. And I think this varies slightly from video to video depending on the topic, but ultimately I think the vast majority of people listen to good reasoning above all else. And you can kind of tell this is the case because whenever any random topic of drama, for instance, comes up, every video significantly varies in its ratio. If everyone just picked a side and stuck to it, every video would reflect more or less the same ratio, but it doesn't. In fact, each video can have a vastly different ratio, and that's most likely because of the argument presented. Now, there are some various counter-arguments to this, and to that I have my own counter-arguments, but that's cool. We can talk about that later. Arguing that isn't really the point of this video. I just want to show the basics of why I pay serious attention to this little bar here. And I know a lot of people did like my video, but if 30% of people disliked it, then I still think I could have done a better job. Depending on the circumstance, I might have to clear up a point I may have miscommunicated, counter-argue something obvious that I forgot to consider, or maybe if there's enough reasoning to sway me, I might flat out just admit I was wrong. I'm not going to, and also don't want to buy into any of that Digibro's fanboys flocking to and disliking the video either. It's something some people have said in the comments, and I would be lying if the thought hadn't crossed my mind too, but no, fuck that. In 99% of the videos I've seen with large portions of dislikes, I've always been able to see a legitimate reason for those dislikes. And I've also seen a lot of videos where the creators use that exact excuse to shrug off any kind of mistake they might have made. And in those instances, I've been sitting here like, bro, I have my gripes with the people you're talking about too, it's just that your argument makes no fucking sense. But you know, I kinda understand what those creators go through now. This was my first experience with actually getting that hate on a wide scale, and it's kinda intense. That's what those 4 weeks without videos was. That was me doing nothing but trying to absorb myself in Dark Souls and being unable to concentrate because I couldn't stop myself from just going over everything in my head over and over and over. You keep trying to find ways to justify it, to keep your dignity intact, and lo and behold, the first conclusion I felt myself trying to jump to was, oh, Digibro's fans can't be argued with. Random disclaimer, this isn't to say I felt bad, feel sorry for me. No, I want you to hate freely. That's the nature of the internet, and it's something I need to get used to. I'm just saying, I don't know, talking about it helps, I guess. It's just a new experience for me and it took a bit to adjust to it, but I think I'm ready to start tackling it now. Anyway, what I'm saying is that, well, storytelling fascinates me. Entertainment fascinates me, YouTube communities and dislikes and public relations and good argument construction, it all fascinates me and I want to understand every bit of it. But I ain't understanding shit if I put my fingers in my ears singing la 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 every time something like this happens. So, this is why every time I get a dislike bar of about 30% or more, I want to do a video like this to talk about what I'm thinking and try and identify exactly where the majority of it comes from. See, I love doing controversial videos, and I love putting forth unique points of view, but if I'm going to do that, I actually have to convince people of my arguments, and a dislike bar like this is obviously indicative of not doing that. Granted, the way I'm looking at the comments right now, I'm thinking the major problem might not have been a problem with the argument itself, and more about how I formed the groundwork. More on that in a bit, because first I want to talk about why I'm not exactly shifting my stance on the argument. I'm sure there'll be a time in future where I'll hold some really stupid view and I'll be rebutted to oblivion and I'll have to turn around and say, yeah, okay, I was wrong. But looking at the top comments, I really don't think that's the case this time. I don't think I was necessarily wrong, but there was definitely something I think I could have done better, so I'm gonna run you through my thought process in order to try and find that. Anyway, let's start. So yeah, the first thing I looked at was counter-arguments people brought forward, and I'm not gonna lie, they confused the hell out of me. I'm willing to go, yeah, okay, fair play if someone brings up a good point, and if someone says something that contradicts what I present, but I still think I can find contradictions with their statement, I can argue the point. But a lot of the comments I got were people giving me arguments that I had thought I had already talked about in the original video. I'm sorry, I know this sounds like a cop-out argument, but seriously, I legit haven't seen people respond like this before. Like, there's comments like this, and this guy says, I feel like a lot of your arguments are, well, this is only kinda bad, so why complain? Which misses the entire point of criticism. And in this case, I'm confused here because I never really said anything was kinda bad. I think my most used quote was, why does this matter? I called them nitpicks, and things like the first major point about exposition I called default, not bad. There were times where I gave the benefit of the doubt when I said, even if this does matter, if that's what you're referring to, but even then I compared things to things which actually get a visual reaction out of the audience, and I basically said, hey, why doesn't any of this get a mention? If you want to do small things, go for it, but if you don't balance their importance out with the big things, you've missed a pretty important part of what fair criticism is. In other comments, a lot of people tried to stick me on what I said about theming, and I genuinely thought this was what I screwed up a few days ago, because I mean, they're right, I didn't go into depth on my thoughts on theming. I was incredibly vague about saying that theming was vague. And I mean, the main reason I didn't go into my thoughts on theming is because 1, I have a bunch of videos already planned about individual concepts like theming, and 2, to fully argue against theming, because I know how widely accepted it is, to argue it to its fullest extent would in itself take longer than the video I would have been encapsulating it in here. But, I mean, hey, this is still on me, because of course people are still going to be pissed if I use "it's not a thing" as a counter-argument, and then not explain why I don't think it's a thing. And so I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then I took a step back, and I realized I already compensated for that by giving theming the benefit of the doubt. Since I didn't give my full reasoning on the concepts, that's why I assumed that maybe it did have some entertainment value, and then argued that it was only one potential way of entertaining an audience, and that you shouldn't downgrade a show for just not having theming, because it's like downgrading a show for not having comedy. It's not a necessity. Like, would you really call a show bad or even limit it to alright if it didn't have theming? If you had the funniest, well-choreographed action series in the world, would you call it alright just because it didn't have theming? And I know there's a couple of good counters to this, like saying Erased had theming, it just did it poorly. And there was one comment I saw that told me that theming was something far more important than just your typical form of engagement. And while it didn't try to explain to me where that was, it was a potential counter-argument that I hadn't felt like I had already talked about in the original video. So props to that guy, I don't know why that didn't get any upvotes. Anyway, this is among the things I would need a whole video to cover, because my preferred argument was going to be that Erased didn't have theming in the first place to screw up. But I can't argue that without first arguing theming as a concept, so yeah, I hope you'll be patient with me on that one. And yeah, I get that this is a cop-out, and if for now, you know what, you want to claim that you won that point over me, go for it. You'll actually be completely justified in doing so. The thing is, I only ever saw one comment like that, and it didn't really get any likes. There were comments with a smaller number of upvotes that talked about the theming, but they weren't really counter-arguments, more just, you're stupid for going against this widely considered important thing. And those comments didn't even acknowledge I gave theming the benefit of the doubt anyway, so I'm sorry if I'm missing something, but I'm having trouble thinking that my thoughts on theming were an actual problem, and more people were disliking for something bigger. Back on the topic of people arguing things that I already thought I went over, like even Digibro said, where are those things, in reference to what made Erased good. But I thought that was what I did at minute like 4 minutes and 9 seconds. I said invest character, stab character in the back, and then strong development arc with Kaio. Or maybe he's just saying it didn't explain why it was good to him, like he didn't understand why that would make it good. I don't know. Actually, looking back, I did say this is what got people excited. Maybe excited was the wrong word there. I don't know. But anyway, this was meant to be my explanation about what was good about it. And I know that isn't all of his comment, but I'll get to that in a second. But do you understand my confusion? Like, honestly, if I get a comment that makes total sense as to why my argument itself was wrong, then I'll jump on that straight away, admit defeat, Bob's your uncle. But I can't concede shit if I don't understand. And the arguments put forward against me, they just didn't make sense. At least not to me. But look, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt here. Maybe I'm just stupid, and I didn't have the right perspective, or I'm not capable of properly comprehending these arguments. Maybe I missed something. It's a legit possibility, knowing me. And what I'm hoping is that if that's the case, the answers will dawn on me in a couple of months. That sort of shit has happened to me in the past, and there's already a couple of videos and small things I've said or done that I want to revisit. So that's why it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case now. So basically, regardless of everything, after this video is done, I'll be taking a step back from all of this, make some other videos on other topics for a while, and in the meantime, I'll be closely monitoring the comments, and maybe someone will comment something that'll help me understand the situation better. I mean, I could keep videos and dialogue going, or maybe even participate in the comments, but honestly, that sort of thing just ends up in a mess. I mean, first off, these comment wars never end. And it's only a matter of time till I say something really stupid because I don't give the comments as much thought as full videos, and ultimately I don't have time to be studying a war with every single comment in order to run every single point to its logical conclusion in hope of finding something helpful. Most people just want to see me do other videos, so I'd rather just take a step back, keep watching the comments with fresh eyes each morning. But yeah, so that's sort of my outline of why I don't think a large number of the dislikes come from putting forth bad arguments. In fact, the comments with the most upvotes seem to hint at a bigger core problem with this video. Except for this comment. This comment I think is incredibly neutral, and I dare say it didn't have a lot of people downvoting it because of that. Anyway, so halfway through scripting my initial draft, I think I started to understand where I might have screwed up. Keep in mind, this is merely the best explanation I have. This could easily be wrong, and I'm still going to sit on this video for some amount of months and hopefully gain a better understanding. But this is simply my best guess right now. So, Digibro in his comments said a lot about how we have different values, the whole subjectivity thing. I see his stuff as nitpicks, he sees it as important, and I'm like, well, yeah, duh. And then I look again at some of the top comments, and the third highest top comment right now is Nimby Gaming, who says, "It's great that you liked Erase, I myself enjoyed it okay, but to say that Digibro shouldn't be bothered by the things he's bothered by is not a fair point." And the fact that subjectivity is coming up as probably the most frequent point might indicate something. And if this is actually the case, oh my god, I'm a fucking idiot. So I can't believe I didn't realize this earlier, but I put absolutely no disclaimer about objectivity and subjectivity in. I absolutely never meant to imply that Digibro didn't have the feelings he had, and I didn't mean to imply that he was quote-unquote wrong in the way he felt about Erased or something stupid like that. If he values different things more than other things, and that's different to my own, then that is fine by me. Like, seriously. But on that note, you're probably asking, so what was this video about? Firstly, a little bit of backstory. So when I first watched Digibro's video, I was very much under the impression he was trying to state something objective. Like him saying he didn't like Erase is fine, I take no issue with that, but things like using the word good instead of like in the title, trying to give reasons as to why the fanbase liked Kaio, and why people were grabbed by the first episode, continued to watch it, as well as saying the fanbase watched it as if waiting for it to get good, all those things felt like objective points about how other people felt about Erase, and was away from how he personally felt about it. And I know I also argued things like voice actors and visual effects significance, even though those statements weren't directly stated to be about Erase fans and majority vote, but the lines about that did come soon after lines like, "I'm less surprised by the fact that the show didn't turn out to be all that great than I am by the fact that so many people expected it to be great in the first place, considering how much evidence there was to the contrary." So I can kinda only assume that your points about voice actors and visual effects was the evidence as to why people shouldn't have expected it to be great. Can you kinda see how I interpreted most of the video as an objective statement about why Erased fans liked Erased? I was never out to deny his opinion of what he didn't like about Erased. All I ever wanted to do was explain why the stuff he brought up in his video didn't matter to the majority, and why it had nothing to do with what they liked and didn't like. Truth be told, I genuinely thought Digibro was trying to state something objective, but according to his comment, that wasn't the idea, and maybe that's on me for misinterpreting. Either way, when I make a video about that and don't explain that I'm arguing specifically about why the majority liked what it liked, of course it's gonna sound like the reasons I'm bringing up I believe apply to everyone. And if I'm correctly diagnosing that, and that was what I screwed up here, then I'm sorry, that was stupid, and I should have foreseen that my video would look like I was trying to explain to Digibro that he felt the wrong way. And looking back on my video, I did say at the start, I very rarely agree with his opinions too, and while I do stand by that, because the definition of opinion is very loose, and I definitely didn't mean it that way, I do see how a lot of what I said would point a large portion of people to that conclusion. And that is completely on me. I'm honestly still scratching my head on how I made this mistake. I think I must have just been like nervous about that video and just jumped straight into counter-arguing without thinking about setting up any sort of groundwork, as if everyone would just magically read my mind. But anyway, so I don't know if his response would change knowing all of this, but there's not much more I can talk about or do on it right now. I talk about things like the suspension of disbelief, because that's an interesting concept, but again, he says his feelings about Kaio on that were specific to him, so I'm not sure if I'm going to tackle any of that here. But yeah, don't think I can really talk about much else. Anyway, bottom line though, if you're saying that that was truly subjective and that you were just talking about why you didn't like it, then fuck it, we cool. I can't and won't argue what you felt. Was never my intention with any argument. I am going to do a short note on theming though. I mean, ultimately I gave theming the benefit of the doubt, and that was my stance on the argument here, but for me to say that I was only concerned by the majority about even things like theming would be a lie. Theming to me is a little bit of a different case. So like, while I'm fine with the idea that everyone feels how they feel no matter how different, I do think it's possible to misunderstand where your feelings come from. I mean, haven't you ever felt an emotion while watching something, then attribute it to a thing, and then eventually watch something else that had that exact same attribute, but you didn't feel the same way? If that happens enough times, it implies you misjudged the attribute, and it wasn't the reason you felt that way. Or at least, I do that anyway. Maybe no one else does. Maybe I'm totally off. But I mean, there are things like nostalgia that we know people misinterpret. Because, I mean, for example, I used to praise Avatar The Last Airbender a lot, like to insane amounts. I recently rewatched it and then realized about a month later that I had suddenly stopped halfway through book 1 and didn't go back to it. After thinking about it a bit, I realized when you actually look at it, there are a fair few episodes in book 1, such as The Great Divide, that don't actually do anything with the characters or story, and as a result, they do feel fairly lackluster in comparison to some of the best episodes of the later season, or even just, like, general episodes of later seasons. So yeah, I think human emotions is an incredibly tricky thing to pull apart, and while we can identify that we feel emotions, I don't think we can as easily identify where those emotions come from. The thing is that I believe that there are concepts that are vague enough that people end up using them as explanations for everything, when in reality they could be using something a lot more specific to describe how they felt. And the amount of times that I've seen people use the word theming in vastly different ways with seemingly different definitions that all seem to clash with each other makes me kinda suspicious that the definition is too vague to be meaningful. That's why I say I don't like it. I'm very iffy on trusting whether or not it's a genuine factor in people's enjoyment. I understand I'm not giving any examples here. I'm sorry, I need to collect all the evidence together and really get my thoughts in line to do a full video on this. I just want to say all this to give some groundwork on that statement, because my thoughts on theming, while I don't believe they matter to a majority vote anyway, I'm also just kinda suspicious about it being a buzzword. Which isn't really telling people they felt wrong or anything, it's me going, you felt that way, but is your observation an accurate reason for why you felt that way? It's different, but kinda close, and it's also psychoanalyzing, and psychoanalyzing is kinda dickish and hard to prove, and it's just messy. And I kinda wish I didn't have to do it, but my curiosity just kinda leads me down this path. I just gotta question what doesn't make sense to me, you know? To be fair, this little debate has made me rethink some things. I'm currently considering the idea of smaller groups of people who just really like digging down into things. People digging down and revealing Dark Souls lore is a good example, for instance. And maybe theming actually is a thing and is very similar to this. Maybe it is actually an accurate reason as to why people feel this way. But hey, who knows what conclusion I'll reach in the next few months. Swear to God, if that Skype noise came up on the fucking... Fuck it, I'm just going on. Regardless, in order to actually argue anything, I'm gonna need time, because it's gonna need a lot of work to put forth a convincing argument. But hey, this is just a small note, because otherwise it looks like I'm contradicting myself. We all feel different, I get that, I just want to know why. As far as this little debate goes, I think the bottom line is that if that's just the way you felt, and the video really is only directed to people who felt similar, then I'm cool with that. If it's not as simple as that, well, start leaving comments, everybody. Also, yeah, I know it's 1/4. That was what the shut the fuck up at the bottom of the screen was, because I made an estimation when scripting, and then when I got to editing, I just decided to make it a joke. A very poorly done joke that probably made me look like an asshole, but, you know. Also, I'm sorry for saying ignored. That implied that you intentionally didn't see what most people loved about Erased, when it probably wasn't the case. I know this is a really random thing to mention, it was just a bad word choice on my part and it probably made me sound like an ass, again. Anyway, wrapping this video up, hopefully I've identified some of the problems with my stuff, but regardless, I'm just going to post this video and return to my normal stuff next week. I'd rather avoid further arguing if I'm being honest, because I'm sure my subscribers just want me to get back to something funny or whatever, rather than spend 5 years on this. I'd rather just release, sit back and watch some different viewpoints roll in until I've learnt as much as I can. I mean, I could do a comment war, but I never think out my points well enough with comments, I feel pressured to reply, and then I say something stupid because of tone, and oh god, it just becomes a mess. I think good arguments should be conducted slowly so the emotions don't get involved, but in the next 12 months or so probably, I might offhandedly mention something about this and any new conclusions I've reached. Okay, this video's gone on long enough, time to end it here. Sorry about the wait and the controversy, and we will return to scheduled programming next week.